It's been a while since the last Twitch stream slash organic content video, and so today, on a lazy Friday, I did catch some of the Chelsea Fulham game, and I noticed that in the 8 minute highlights that NBC put forward, it didn't quite capture necessarily all the nuances in the game. For example, it didn't capture a really good chance for Fulham from Andreas Pereira. So more so similar to how I did the World Cup retrospective, being at a pretty high level. This will be pretty similar. Won't be recapping specific events per se, beyond say that Pereira strike that was nicely saved by Kepa, Avita Balaga. But more so than just the general point I want to make is that Chelsea, they do look quite pedantic with the ball. Many of their transition, there were some really good. I didn't get to watch the full game. I missed some of the time. Before I missed 20 minutes, like 10 minutes after the half, 10 minutes before the half. But there were some really entertaining channels during the game where neither team wasn't a block, neither team wasn't their build up shape. But instead, the ball was pinging around as teams were constantly in transition, misplacing passes, and being in a state of flux. And so, in terms of what stood out from that, is that some of these Chelsea players really did just misplace, not necessarily simple passes, but on the run, on the break, setting up the counterattack and misplacing the passes and giving Fulham a chance to recuperate. Now, I'm sure that some of you have seen those the videos or TikToks pointing out Mason Mount's tendency to play conservative balls or not be as progressive a passer, which I will touch on shortly. But I mean, but I will say Kukurea stood out making bad passes, some degree of Gallagher, and then Mudryk, Ziyech, Havertz, all to blame. Enzo Fernandez wasn't necessarily making progressive passes, although in large part that was because of his position, where it seemed that Chelsea would settle into a back three with Silva, or essentially a back two, screened by Fernandez with Silva, Shelley, and Fernandez dropping in pretty deep. There was a screenshot on Twitter that criticized Chelsea's shape, which effectively looked more so like a 3-2-5. And so in large part and that's emblematic of how Enzo essentially acted as a halfback or a center back, which isn't really a strong suit, right? I suppose in World Cup, out of that midfield of him, McAllister, because DePaul would have that more defensive role, and Fernandez is not set for that role, and of course Conte is not available. But just revealed that Chelsea's shape was, in general, right, like if it's that, it's a bit predictable. But of course, Chelsea weren't in that shape when they were trying to counterattack on the break, but to the point that of Chelsea simply misplaying relatively simple passes. That was a pretty noticeable observation. And of course, I'm really not a good viewer of football, analysis of football. I can maybe tell you the formation to general shape, but then like the actual sequences the sequences or passing sequences that a team is trying to do, or pressing triggers, can't really tell you that. And so lastly, on note for Chelsea, or a couple points for Chelsea, Ziyech really is impressive how he is really, frankly, the only person on that team with any form of vertical passing, in that he's the only person who would consistently make ambitious passes up the field, diagonals, attempt through balls to Havertz or Mudryk. Only player. As of course, he does have the tendency to play deeper, to drop centrally, allow Gallagher to get out on the wings, or tuck in, allow Reece James to move down, which is a good idea because again, Reece James is a pretty good offensive player. But again, Havertz is playing as your 9 functionally. can't blame him. Mudryk, Chelsea, NBC had a stat where he had the fewest amount of touches, which certainly from the eye test looked the case. And then Mount, yeah, not performing the best. But again, I will say really impressed by the center backs, Silva and the Shealy. Excuse me, because there was a sequence where Fulham had pretty good sustained pressure. Like the possession statistics at the time, the game ended possession wise 72, or excuse me, 67-33. And so at the time, this was in the first half, around like the 20th, 25th minute. It was very similar to possession statistics, like 68-32. And Fulham had a pretty consistent bout of pressure. They had Mitrovic, they had a really nice cross from Tete to Willian, who then headed it to Mitrovic, who just knocked it wide of the post. You had the dashing run by, I believe it was the Corva Reed that Badiashile was there to stop it, just by standing his ground. But if it was a lesser center back, like as I imagine, I hate to pick on it, let's say, but some center backs probably would have panicked, and not stood their ground and allowed the Corva Reed to get on goal, or at least get a stinging shot off. From Fulham's perspective, really impressed by João Palhinha, really impressed by Tete, and really impressed by Anthony Robinson. Because João Palhinha in midfield did a pretty good job, especially like, in a lot of the sequences. Like he was functionally on his own in the on Fulham's side in the midfield, and like especially in point transition where he's tracking back, but then you have two Chelsea players on both sides of him, essentially a 2-on-1. Plus, then of course he does have his center backs, and he does have other players. But of course, same goes for Chelsea and Chelsea's front three occupying those players. And so for his job in the midfield to containing that pressure was pretty impressive and stood out to me. Anthony Robinson and Tete really impressed me, playing wide, tracking back, and especially Tete making a really impressive, especially the one to Willian, to Mitrovic, really impressive cross. And then for Tete, something that stood out then was his extremely impressive clearance. I forget who against who, but it was extremely impressive and saved a goal in the second half, I believe. But extremely impressed by Tete. And Mitrovic didn't play essentially as I would have imagined in this game. Wasn't in the box in the entire time. He did drop deeper, but defensively impressive. There was a pretty impressive thing. Of course, you think of Mitrovic as more of a target man, right? But then there was a sequence in the first half where Mitrovic gets the ball back and he's on the counter around the halfway line. He slips but keeps possession. Of course, he does lose it then, but just to keep possession after being challenged in the first place, hold off the ball for a couple seconds. Was pretty impressive. But again, Mitrovic wasn't really just in the box, as you might imagine if you hadn't watched the game. And then Willian, nothing too impressive, but so you tell still dangerous on the ball. So overall, yeah, again with the players Chelsea has or how deep the roster goes with Tony, Chukwuemeka, Sterling, you expect more from this Chelsea squad. Of course, they are injured, and but at this point in the season, you had your winter break. You just had a recent break for the FA Cup and Carabao Cup. And if you're Chelsea, you really do need results if you're 10th. But yeah, nothing. But again, like if these players, like this midfield, it should like if you took this midfield from last season, with Mason Mount and Conor Gallagher's form at Crystal Palace, you'd rate it. But yeah, honestly, you can't. Of course, Havertz he hit the post and was offside on a couple of chances. I can't play that. Mudryk, apparently he was playing a bit sick, but honestly, he wasn't too involved. And yeah, really didn't get a chance to run at the defense, which comes back to the poor passing from Chelsea's part to get the ball to him. And it seemed like Mudryk more so had to, when he got the ball, is more so in positions where his back is to the goal and he has to pass it back centrally. And Fulham were in a shape where he can't make a darting run to get through. Of course, it looks like he can't play like a deeper role. For example, he had a through ball to Mason Mount that was just a bit too strong for Mason. But so I mean, Chelsea it seems that Chelsea does have the pieces, especially with that defense, the center backs being that sound. But you'll see Reece James if he could play full 90, switch Correa for Ben Chilwell moving forward. But yeah, so Chelsea work in progress. But again, the only form of progressive threat really is Ziyech because for Colin Gallagher, I saw Badiashile try deep balls, long balls, didn't quite connect on top of just not attempting in the first place. But Ziyech is frankly the only progressive passer, and you have to think at a certain point, and it does make sense because Kai Havertz and especially Mudryk are have pace, but it does get a bit predictable if Ziyech cuts inside and winds up and if because once you because Ziyech he is left-footed, and so if you see him cut inside, it is a bit predictable. Now I guess you would think that Tim Ream and Idrissa Diop would be a pretty easy backline to attack, but Anthony Robinson and Tete again, like to my point earlier, of them being really impressive this game, tracking back and going forward, nullified that threat. So overall, bit disappointing for Chelsea. It does say something when Enzo Fernandez jumps into the starting, and of course Chelsea didn't necessarily have a complementary midfielder to go in, but instead to play a 4-3-3 and field Enzo in the midfield versus a 4-2-3-1 does say something about the overall shape of Chelsea. But again, for Fulham, honestly, at this point, you have to say pretty strong contenders to make it into European competition at this rate with the Conference League at least, especially with honestly the Fulham Tottenham or Brighton Fulham versus Tottenham. It's it's more of a flip a coin in terms of who do you prefer, right? So anyways, yeah, a bit of a, and it really isn't black about Chelsea this season. But yeah, Enzo did look good on the ball. Hopefully, they'll be willing to play Enzo in a more progressive role instead of shielding the back line. Because you think that Gallagher might swapping Gallagher and Fernandez's roles might be. Of course, Gallagher does seem to be a bit more athletic or more pacey than Fernandez, but Chelsea at this point have enough speed and they have enough width with Reece James and Kukurea or Chilwell, and so having another more progressive ball player on top of Ziyech in the midfield, especially after how Mount's had an extremely disappointing season, might be in the cards, or might be a good attempt. So, anyways, thank you for watching. This is me going into my football playlist, pretending to be a pundit. But thank you for watching, and have a good weekend.